Well, let me guess. You're all stuck inside. You're looking for something to do. We've got something for you here at The Hustle. It's a happy hour edition of the Fantasy Football Hustle. Free agency is on our minds. And Dwain McFarland is here with me. I am Brian Drake. This is the Fantasy Football Hustle. Dwain, how's it going, man? Let's first get everything out of the way here with this coronavirus stuff. How are you? How's the family? How are things in Texas?
Man, we're probably similar to pretty much everybody else. I mean, the family and everybody we're doing good. But the kids are out of school at least until April 6th. So this week is actually spring break. They'll be out at least another 2 weeks. But we don't know for sure. You know, we've already received some emails just saying, hey, just kind of hold tight. You know, my oldest son is a senior, so we don't know. I mean, is there going to be a graduation? Is he going to have prom? Wow. I mean, we don't really know like any of this stuff right now. So I think, you know, we're in a similar boat as the rest of America. You know, we had headed up to Colorado, you know, we got the kids already, talked about social distancing and, you know, brought plenty of hand sanitizer and gloves and all kinds of stuff. And we were going to let them do some skiing. And by the time we got there, the slopes were already closed, which I had told my wife, I said, you know, if we go, we got to make sure the kids are going to be safe. You know, it's just this, we got to make sure we're not bringing this thing back to anybody else. I said, you know, B, there's a really good chance it's probably going to be closed. And so That's exactly what happened by the time we got there. The night we got there, that night at like midnight, they put out an announcement that, you know, they were closing down the lifts. And we were going where it wasn't, there were no confirmed cases or anything. This was Durango, Colorado. So up, you know, in the North Country, like Keystone and Breckenridge and all that, they had a lot of issues. So I knew for sure those were probably going to be closed down. So anyway, we turned around and drove back. We did spend one day up there and everybody had left pretty much except for like a few families. So everybody was spread out and people were just sledding down the mountain. So our kids, my son, you know, he had his snowboard and his buddy was with him. So they just had to hike up, you know, and then come back down, but there was nobody there. So we turned it into as good of a time as we can, which I think is kind of what most people are doing.
Yeah. I mean, it's going to be like this for a while. I'm up here in New York and the cases are just exploding here left and right. My wife's a teacher. Luckily, she's home here with the two kids. She's kind of going through a routine with them. And I'm sure a lot of you guys out there listening and watching are going through the same thing. Like, what the hell do we do with these kids? You know, like she's trying to get them on a routine and teaching them stuff a little bit every day. But yeah, it's going to be crazy here for the next few weeks. And if you want to get your mind off it, because I know it can be depressing at times to think of lost wages and not going to school and work and all that. So let's use the NFL and free agency for an hour here, just to have some fun and take our mind off things. And unless you live under a complete rock that even this coronavirus is not getting into your brain, you might have heard Tom Brady's on the move. And we'll start everything here on the hustle with the quarterbacks, and Brady's going to Tampa. I thought it was going to be the Chargers, Dwayne. He's leaving after 20 years in New England, heading down to Tampa. So let's break this down. There's a lot of tentacles here to the Brady, to the Buccaneers thing. First of all, let's talk about his role in this offense, Bruce Arians' offense, Byron Leftwich is his offensive coordinator. What does this do now to Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, O.J. Howard? And they're going to have to add a running piece because there's no way you're going with Ronald Jones and the clowns they have now. They're going to add somebody. So let's start there with the effects of Brady on this offense.
Right. So I think, you know, the good news for Tom Brady is he's going to an offense that loves to pass the ball. I mean, Bruce Arians, if you look at him historically as a coach versus other coaches in the league, you know, his teams are typically going to be around, you know, 60% pass. Now that's not drop back. That's actually attempts. So that's not accounting scrambles and sacks and all that. But even if you account those things, Bruce Arians is much more likely to be throwing the ball really than doing anything else. So that's going to be, you know, a good thing for Brady. And then, I mean, I think that fits with really, if you think about the talent that he's coming to, you named a few players, you know, Mike Evans, you think about Chris Godwin, think about what could happen with O.J. Howard. This really could be, you know, I'm thinking back through Tom Brady. You know, I was thinking about this before the show, and I was thinking back through, you know, all the players he's played with. Now, the year he had Welker plus Randy Moss, and he had Dante Stallworth, and I think Ben Watson was still there at the time. That was really good, right? And Moss just went nuts, you know, that first year that those two guys were together. But other than that, this is going to be the best surrounding cast that Brady has had. So what's going to be interesting, really to me, Drake, is just to see, okay, what happens here? Because we know Bruce Arians, he likes to throw the ball, but he doesn't just like to throw the ball. He likes to push the ball vertically, down the field. You and I have talked, a lot about that. We talk a lot about coaching on the show. And if you think about Arians, that's really his calling card. So if you think about, what he did back in his days with Pittsburgh, with, Ben Roethlisberger, if you think about, Andrew Luck's, first year in the league where he was offensive coordinator and took over as interim head coach. And then you think about his time with Carson Palmer, his average depth of target, 10.1, 10.2, 11.3, 10.8, 9.8, 10.8. And then last year with Jameis Winston, it was a 10.9. So those are all in the top echelon of the league every year. And it's over and over and over. And then if you look at what Tom Brady's done, last year, his average depth of target was an 8. We've got to go all the way back to 2017. Tom had a 9.5. And then before that, you have to go all the way back to 2007. We had 9.5. But typically, Brady's have been around an 8, 8.3, 8.4, 8.3, 8.5. So it's going to be really interesting to see what happens here. We've got kind of these two, I don't want to say they're immovable objects, but how do they come together? My gut tells me that, as much as Arians is more of a true vertical down the field guy, when you go sign a guy like Tom Brady, you're going to let him do what he does best. Right. So I think what you'll see, and again, this is something that we'll have to track, all through training camp, knock on wood, hoping that, we are healthier and we can have training camp. Some of the news I've read here, lately, and some of the models say, who knows if we'll even have football this year, but we won't focus on that for right now. But with Tom Brady, thinking about, the way they're going to run the offense, I think there's going to be more of a meet in the middle. I think what you'll see is Brady's average depth of target probably average out to be around where he's at now. I think where the difference could be is really in the number of true deep shots that they take, because that's something Brady hasn't done as much. So if you look at Arians' offense, it's often, Drake up around 15%, 16%, 16%, 16%. He has a lot of offenses that have taken deep shots over 15% of passes. And so if you look at Tom Brady's career, that's something, really he's never done. The number of attempts that he's taken, that have been that deep has rarely been that. So, I'm looking at it right now. The percentage of his attempts over 15 yards, 10%, 10%, 10%, 11, 10, 10, 10. He's got a 13%er in there. Now, he's not bad at it. Even in the recent years, for Brady, it was 11, 13, 11, 10, 10.3. So there's a good sample, but his accuracy hasn't been bad. A 43%, right. A 46%, a 51%. His completion percentages have actually been above the league average, despite the fact that, you hear this notion that his arm is gone and that he's washed. So I think what we're going to see, honestly, is his average depth of target will probably stay around what we're used to. It'll probably go up a little bit, because I think we will see Brady take a few more deep shots. I don't think we'll see him down around 10%. So Here's my, as we sit here today, way too early thoughts around this passing game. I think Chris Godwin's safe, because he'll be the guy that'll be more of the intermediate underneath, operating out of the slot. He's going to be his new Julian Edelman. And this is going to be it's a very different game, obviously, than Julian Edelman. The way Chris Godwin wins versus the way Julian Edelman wins, very two different players. What would have been amazing if Adam Humphries was still on this roster, right? Then we would have still had Julian Edelman plus 2 outside weapons. But I think that's going to be really good, from a standpoint for Chris Godwin. I don't think we're going to see much of a drop off for him. I think with Mike Evans, that's really where there's a little bit more of a question, and it comes down to what does the philosophy end up being? If they don't take as many of the deep shots, and we know that that's really where Evans gets targeted more, it could hurt Mike Evans a little bit, right? If they're not going to play to his strengths. Now, again, they could change and remold the offense, and Mike Evans stays just as involved as ever. He's still an elite player. He's at the top of his game. So it'll be interesting to see, what they do with Evans. But Evans has lived off of huge efficiency over the last several years. So it's going to be, at least over the last 2. So it's going to be really key for us to just kind of keep an eye on what's going with that. I think the other guy that we got excited about last year was O.J. Howard, and that just never really materialized. And Tom Brady is a guy that we know has, he's liked using his tight ends. Now he's also had some really good ones like Rob Gronkowski. So I think O.J. Howard is the guy that we'll have to watch. Now you still have Cameron Brate, on the roster. If they change the offense a little bit and they mold it more towards Brady, which is more of your intermediate anticipation type throws, then I see OJ Howard getting out into the routes more. If they stay more into this, no, we're going to run 4 verticals down the field and Tom, hit our guys deep, then I think you're still going to see OJ Howard having to stay in to block more just because they don't really have a 3-down runner that they like putting back there as a blocker. So it ends up being the tight end. And that's what happened to OJ Howard last year. So I think Brady's influence on the offense will say, hey, let me get the tight end involved, but we'll have to see if the offense evolves. So for now, I think Chris Godwin's firmly entrenched where he was. Mike Evans, I would give a slight downgrade to right now. And an OJ Howard, I would say, hey, let's look at it as the glass half full right now, and we can be optimistic about it. And we'll just have to kind of pick up the breadcrumbs as we go through the preseason and see what we're hearing.
Yeah, and we'll see if they bring a running back in there. We got some guys in our chat room here asking about it. Do you think Melvin Gordon or Todd Gurley ends up going there? And I think that's a very possible situation, is because they know if you've got Brady and you only have him for, let's say, 2 years, right?
Yeah.
You've got to put somebody around him now. This isn't like, oh, we'll find somebody in the draft. Like, this is a situation where you need a proven player to jump in with him immediately.
Right, absolutely. We'll see what happens with that. But yeah, I mean, the hot one I've been hearing for the last 24 hours is Gurley. And I just saw another tweet about that here a few minutes ago, how apparently that's not dead. That really could happen. And that Tampa Bay had been in talks, with the Rams about potentially being a suitor, in that kind of a deal. I don't know about the deal with Gurley. I would be hard pressed still for me. Like, really, would a team go pick up that contract knowing what's up with his knee? I just don't get it. When you could sign Melvin Gordon off the street.
Right.
I agree. They need to
pay him less, probably.
Somebody tweeted at me the other day, man, what if, CEH ended up, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, what if he ended up, in Tampa? Man, talk about like a great little scat back kind of guy that Brady could hit with the dump offs, like he did with Dion Lewis and even way back in the day, Kevin Falk, remember those guys? Hell, Rex Burkhead, having some really good success as a receiver out of the backfield. But I think Melvin Gordon or Todd Gurley, if they landed there, yeah, I think that would be fine. And man, we would be looking at, a pretty potent offense, I would think. I was also looking at something else earlier, on Twitter. I think the Bucks, the projected wins, like their over under on wins moved up by 2 when Tom Brady signed. I want to say they went from like 7 to 9.5. So Vegas is already expecting much bigger things with this quarterback upgrade. Yeah, they went from 7.5 projected wins to 9.5 for their over-under. And that was a shift between March 16th and March 18th. So yeah, the Bucks are looking good, from a standpoint of where they've been. I think the biggest thing we're going to see, though, Drake, is Brady's going to cut down on the turnovers. And so the game scripts where Winston, had to continue throwing and just her, just heaving it down the field all the time because they were always throwing picks, right? And then having to they were in all these super close games where they were trailing. We're going to lose some of those game scripts. So Now, will they have a running game to lean on? Back to, I think it was Axel that was asking about that over in the chat room. Man, if they do, the Bucks could find themselves leading more than they've led, at any other time, really, in the past 10 years. They'll still be a pass team, but
improved.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, yeah, like you said, lots of moving parts. Do we want to hit kind of on I know we don't know who's going to be the quarterback yet for the Patriots, but I think you have to think this is obviously a huge downgrade right away for Julian Edelman, no matter if it's a rookie or if they just go with someone on the roster. Now, they could end up, who knows, Bill Belichick being Bill Belichick, if they can't get Tua or something like that in the draft, maybe they trade, for Cam Newton. I don't know. So it's really a to be determined. But I think, man, just the simpatico nature of Brady and Edelman's relationship, I think no matter who comes in, we just can't look at Julian Edelman anymore as being, 150, 170 target guy. Obviously, we know there's injury concerns there as well.
I think this is a full kind of tear down in New England. You're seeing so many guys walk out the door, especially on the defensive side of the ball. And it's somehow they all end up going to Tennessee and Detroit. But anyways, that's another story. But
I mean, Winston is available. Axel just put in the chat room. He's got his money on Winston to the Pats. But wouldn't that be hilarious if that's what happened? I feel like Jameis Winston would drive Bill Belichick insane.
That's not his kind of guy. I mean, you look last
with the
year.
Turnovers.
If you look last year, they almost threw the same amount of passes. There's 7 pass difference between Winston and Brady. their completion percentage was 0.1% difference. 60.7 for Winston, 60.8 for Brady. Now, Winston threw for 1,000 more yards. His yards per attempt were 8.2. Brady's was, I want to say it was a career low, 6.6. But the big difference, as we all know, 20 less sacks, 30-8 interception margin, fumbles. Brady fumbled 6 last times. He's just going to get the ball out quicker. There's no way that Winston is a guy that Belichick can win with. You know who Belichick can win with?
To me, Winston's throwing that many picks with a great supporting cast. What would he look like with really an unproven receiver core like what we've seen even Brady struggle with, in New England? I do think Jameis Winston obviously has talent, and he's great for fantasy, but it's just the turnover margin is the biggest issue, and really what he did last year from a completion percentage standpoint is far more impressive than Brady. I mean, an average depth of target of almost 11 versus Brady's 8, and to only be, a few completion percentage, points away, really that puts, if you adjust for average depth of target, I mean, what Winston did was actually really impressive.
If I'm the Patriots, tank on the season, get Trevor Lawrence next year. You have a ton of cap space, picks. Go get him and start it all over again. Get Joe Flacco to play this year. Who cares? Let's go now and talk about what's going to happen in some of these other quarterbacks moving around here. Phillip Rivers, as the worst kept secret in football, went to Indianapolis on a 1-year, $25 million deal. Not a great deep ball passer anymore. I think in fantasy, you're going to say a lot of guys really high on Naheem Hines because of what Eckler and Danny Woodhead type guys have done in the past with Rivers. Marlon Mack is still there to carry the bread. So what's our impact here with Rivers going to Indy, Dwain, on Jack Doyle, on T.Y. Hilton, and then this running game? And where would you see these guys coming off the board in a fantasy draft? Is there one of these guys you're more apt to draft than the others?
Yeah, so I think number one, for folks to remember is that Frank Reich, has history with Phillip Rivers. He was his offensive coordinator in 15 and 14. He was his quarterbacks coach in 2013 before Frank Reich moved over to Philadelphia in 2016. And he really did, some great things, with Rivers. Rivers actually had a little bit of a, rejuvenated, last few years to his career after having a really good year when Frank Reich came in, and they really started working on getting the ball out quicker and not pushing the ball down the field so much, which is oddly with Rivers' arm challenges, he had an average depth of target of a 9, last year. So, I mean, this was something where they really were trying to force him to push the ball down the field more. And you saw his interception spike, right? You saw 20 interceptions versus 23 touchdowns. They were also in some terrible game scripts. So Rivers was, I think, trying to play above his head, carry the rest of the team in order to really, just try to salvage the season, which unfortunately, the Chargers weren't able to do despite having a really good roster. So this last year, 13% of Rivers' passes were actually, of that deep variety. And that, it's like you said, that's not really, what his game is all about. Okay. I mean, if you look at his deep passing over his career, 10% of his attempts, 12%, 11%, only 9%, but he's high. He's a very good anticipatory thrower. He's very accurate underneath and in the intermediate game. If you look at him as far as his completion percentage, at intermediate passing and short passing, he's one of the better passers in the league, so when you see a guy like Drew Brees that throws up these 80% completion marks, well, it's because he's throwing the ball much shorter. And that's what we're going to see in this offense. We even saw it with Andrew Luck before he retired. His early years, with Frank Reich, whenever he was actually healthy, he was not throwing the ball as far down the field. His average depth of target is down. So I think that's what you're going to see with Rivers. It's going to be much more underneath intermediate stuff. And I think it's going to be great for T.Y. Hilton, to be honest, because Jacoby Brissett is not an anticipatory thrower. And so whenever T.Y. Hilton's flashing into windows and has a guy beat and he's got a guy flat-footed where he can make a big play, Brissett has got to wait another second before he's actually going to see it and make the throw. That's going to be gone with Rivers. Rivers is he'll be in time with these guys. And so I think it's going to be a big thing, for T.Y. Hilton. You got Eric Ebron, who's also not being re-signed because they were upset with him. I guess he kind of surprised them whenever he just decided to go on the IR this last year. So I think Paris Campbell is a guy to really keep your eye on. He had some juice. He was showing some things last year. And so with Ebron being gone, I think that just really opens things up for him in the slot. And then our old guy, our old pal Drake. What about Jack Doyle?
That's the guy right there.
I'm telling you, Jack Doyle could end up being a top 12 fantasy player. People forget how bad he had hurt his hip 2 years ago, and he battled back from that. This past year, he had to share targets with several other guys on the field, didn't really have a good quarterback. I could easily see this offense being something, where you see Jack Doyle, Paris Campbell, one of those two guys emerges to go along with T.Y. Hilton. I think Phillip Rivers is a big upgrade over Jacoby Brissett. Jacoby Brissett played admirably, but he's a see-it-throw-it guy. He's not a guy that anticipates. He can't make the offense really click the way that Rivers can, even at this old age. Even with his arm washed, we've seen Phillip Rivers, still capable of having a 30, 35 touchdown, passing season, which is plenty to, really support, 2 or 3 targets in that offense. And then the runners, I would still put my money on Marlon Mack. Mm-hmm. And I know there's a lot of talk around Nyheim Hines and, what all's going on there, and Hines is a guy that's always going to stay involved. We know how Frank Reich comes from Doug Peterson and how there's always this involvement of 3 backs, 2 backs, 4 backs. It's never just one. So as far as the running backs go, I think what Rivers is going to do is he's going to give them more trips to the red zone, because last year you saw a shift even in the way the Colts offense played. They tried to slow things down. They tried to lean a little bit more on their defense when they could. They tried to manage game scripts. I think they'll get to open things up a little bit more with Rivers. So I think that's going to be more trips into the red zone, going to be more trips inside the 5-yard line, which will be good mostly for Marlon Mack.
I think you're going to see T.Y. Hilton just get peppered a la Keenan Allen, 130, 140 targets coming his way if they really can connect. And
I think that's what we have to watch, Dre. Yeah. That's where I want to see in the preseason. Man, that could be Paris Campbell. If he's the guy moving all over the formation and they're putting him in the slot a lot, Paris Campbell could be a huge steal this season. I haven't even looked at what his ADP is right now, but I'm guessing
bazillionth round.
It may be at the highest in the 8th or 9th round, but he's a guy, I guarantee you, Paris Campbell's a name that's going to shoot up the charts this preseason. So if you're in a dynasty league and you can get your hands on Paris Campbell, we don't know long-term what's the quarterback situation going to be here. Notice this was just a 1-year deal. I still think the Colts are hoping against hope. They think Andrew Luck could still come back in another year. And they think that's a possibility. So let's see what happens with it. But Paris Campbell is a guy that, man, you can move all over the formation. He's a great run after the catch guy, despite, not being, known as being someone that was really polished coming out. He showed some really good things in the games that he played. So I'm super excited about Paris Campbell, and I'm with you on T.Y. Hilton. I'm totally there, but let's see what happens in the preseason. And those two guys Rivers is good enough to support both of those guys as having, one of them in the top 12 wide receivers and the next one fall into the next 12. You could have 2 top 24 receivers from this team.
One thing I'm not excited about, Dwain, is Teddy Bridgewater to Carolina. 3 years, $63 million. I get it. He was 5-0 as a starter last year, filling in for Drew Brees. I'm just not a Teddy guy. I think that Carolina is going to be looking for a quarterback in a year or two, just like, all these teams, the past year, you see Jacksonville just traded away Nick Foles. And if you don't have the guy and you bring in kind of like a mediocre placeholder, that's what they are. They're a placeholder. So let's hear your thoughts here. You got CMC, you still got Curtis Samuel, DJ Moore, really elite weapons, young guys coming into their prime, who should be ready to go and have really big breakout seasons at receiver. But I don't know. I'm not a Teddy guy. What do you think of this new offense, the new coordinator and all that stuff? We haven't gotten into our coaching breakdown yet, but I don't know. I don't feel it with Teddy.
Yeah. Teddy leaves a lot, to be desired. He's a check down artist. He's not a guy that's going to make a lot of gusto throws. He's not a guy that's going to win you a ton of games on his back. He's going to play within a system. He's not going to beat you. But Carolina is a team that, man, their defense has got problems. Luke Kuechly, is gone. Eric Reed, is gone. Thomas Davis obviously was gone even the year before. Mario Addison, their defensive end, is gone. Their defense is going to be terrible. So they're going to be in situations where they're going to be trailing. or they're going to be in close games. And I mean, they're going to need to pass the ball. So I think this is fine for Christian McCaffrey because he's going to be exactly in the area of the field that Teddy Bridgewater loves. Who's the other guy that's going to be in that area? DJ Moore. DJ Moore is the guy working the underneath and the intermediate. Between those two guys, I guess you could see Ian Thomas, I know you like him, the tight end there. We'll have to see what they do with him. But DJ Moore and Christian McCaffrey are going to be operating in the area that Teddy Bridgewater feels the safest. So Teddy Bridgewater in Minnesota in 2014, average depth of target 7.9, a 7.5 in 2015. Those are both well below the league averages. And then last year, a whopping 6.1. So we've got a bus driver. That's really all we have. So when you have a bus driver, typically who do they throw to? The underneath and intermediate options. So what I worry about though is, man, I don't know that this offense can score 20 touchdowns. Like Christian McCaffrey, how many touchdowns did he score on his own last year? I don't have it pulled up in front of me. It was something insane. They might be excited to score that many touchdowns as a team this whole year. And I know people are probably thinking, well, man, he's got to be better than, what they had last year, at quarterback. Maybe, but at least Kyle Allen was willing to take some chances and try to do some things. Bridgewater's just not, and I'll be surprised also. Can he survive? He's not a real big guy. He's small frame, as far as his lower body is concerned. A good college quarterback, but just has consistently underperformed when it comes to being able to support fantasy weapons in the real NFL. And as we know from work like that Josh Hermsmeyer has done, average depth of target is pretty predictive. It's like when you look at a lot of quarterbacks, even what they did in college, it actually translates over to what they do in the NFL. And so Bridgewater, we've got a big enough sample size on him that I think we know what he is. I don't think this is a good thing. It's really bad for Curtis Samuel.
What do you think about this offense that they're going to run there? Preliminary work you've done on Carolina. Do you think it changes a whole lot? How excited are you for the new offense?
Man, it's still a TBD for me, to be honest. I have not studied, everything about Matt Rule or, his new offensive coordinator, who was the wide receivers coach at LSU this last year and helping run that offense. So I haven't studied it, enough. But I think it's going to be one of those deals where game scripts are going to dictate that they're going to have to throw a lot, right?
Sure.
With this defense and what's going on, I think they're just going to have to be passing. I think, unfortunately, what wins games and what makes offenses explosive is, yards per attempt. We've seen that the one stat that correlates with wins in the NFL, one individual stat that correlates with wins more than anything, including turnovers in the NFL, is your net yards per attempt, which is your yards per attempt minus your sack yards. Teddy Bridgewater is going to be getting sacked a lot, and he doesn't throw the ball down the field. This team's going to be punting a lot. I'm just not excited about it. We can come back and I'll definitely dig more into what the offense could potentially look like. And Axel's asking about the Panthers O-line. They've added Okung, from who was recently, he was with the Chargers before, he had some health issues last year. So, they're trying to do some things on the offensive line, but it seems more like patchwork. I haven't seen enough from them to think that it's going to be enough for us to get super excited about anybody on this team. I do think there's a chance for a guy like DJ Moore to catch 80 or 90 balls, along with Christian McCaffrey.
DJ Moore's ADP, according to Fantasy Football Calculator, in a half-point PPR, 18.3 right now. So that's a little high for me.
That's too high because he's not going to score touchdowns.
Yeah.
I haven't done projections yet. I've started them. But I would say if he got to 6 touchdowns, you would do backflips. Mm-hmm. He's more likely to be in the 3 to 4 range if you think about how bad that team's going to be. Now, like I said, things could change. We could see some things and get a little excited. They'll play the Saints, who have a good defense. Atlanta's defense isn't good. If you look at the Bucs defense, like you said, it's getting a little better, but they still give up a ton of passing yards too. So, his division schedule is not going to be terrible. So that could help him a little bit. I haven't looked at really, the overall schedule, for the Panthers, but that's going to be too high. That's just going to be too high. I would love DJ Moore in the 3rd or 4th round, but to take him in the 2nd round, which is not surprising just because he's an ascending talent. He showed out well down the stretch last year, played really good. and people noticed him. He's a young receiver, and he's doing a good job. But this is bad.
How about this new little skin we have here for all the folks watching us on YouTube and Periscope here? Thanks to 5 Yard Lee, one of our guys from the 5 Yard Rush podcast over in London, England. I was on their show about a month ago, and Dwain's been on there a few times. He designed this whole little what do you even call this? I don't even know, the overlay for us, and it looks great. So give him a follow at 5 Yard Lee, Lee. He did this, so thank you very much, Lee. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Lee.
Yeah, this is pretty cool. Another guy on the move, and I'm an Eagles fan. There's a place in my heart forever for Nick Foles, but he's not a starting quarterback in the NFL. He's just not. Now he's on the move to Chicago. They moved him for a 4th-round pick. So Mitch Trubisky is going to get challenged with that starting role. I don't know necessarily if he keeps it or not. This is going to be one of those situations to me, Dwain, like last year, where you could have Foles starting. Let's say he gets banged up or he looks like shit. And then all of a sudden, oh, here comes Mitch. And then Mitch plays well for a game or two. Let's give him some run, see if we can extend him. And then it's just going to go back and forth. And then a year from now, they're drafting somebody.
Yeah, so here's the thing, to remember. So Bill Lazor is the new offensive coordinator there. They got rid of Mark Helfrich. But Lazor actually has roots back to, really more of that college spread, system. So think of, Chip Kelly, and think of the 2 years when Nick Foles was at his best. 2013,
the years of Chip Kelly. Absolutely.
27 touchdowns, 2 picks. Average depth of target at 9.8 yards. The next year was a 10.2. Otherwise, listen to this. Foles, this is where a coaching scheme truly changed a quarterback. 6.8, 9, 8.6, 7.8. Been more of an intermediate or underneath kind of thrower. In that offense where they opened things up, and remember, that was Deshaun Jackson taking the top off. They do have some weapons in Chicago. I think you could have some concerns late in the season as the weather gets colder. That's going to put a damper on the offense. But I think this is an offense that if they get to, have OTAs, they get to do the things that you need to do to be able to really, grow and gel. I think we could see Nick Foles do a little better than what people expect, because he's going to be playing in an offense that's really similar to the one, that he loved. Now, obviously, Matt Nagy's going to have his fingerprints all over this. He comes from the Andy Reid background, but I think, I think there's a specific reason they went for Foles. They traded for a guy that's got a decent amount of money left on a contract.
Yeah.
So I don't even think this is a competition. I think Mitch Trubisky is done. I think Nick Foles is probably going to win this job, because with the defense they had, they just went out and added Robert Quinn, who left the Cowboys. So they've got Quinn, they've got Mack, they've got the guys they signed. This defense has a chance still to be dominant if they can just not turn the ball over. And I think that's what they're hoping. Foles can bring that plus a few big plays and just kind of stabilize the offense. Now, am I excited about Nick Foles? He's not a guy that's going to get drafted. But remember, there's guys that pop up every year, Drake, that you can use or you can stream for a few games. And depending on what happens, with the skill positions in Chicago, Foles he's shown a few times that he can do it. Now, he's very streaky, like you've said in the past on this show. But I think he could at least stabilize the offense, because he's not going to freaking airmail at 25 yards, over Allen Robinson's head, right? Or over Anthony Miller's head. But Anthony Miller is really the guy that's ascending on this offense. He's the guy that I would watch. I think Nick Foles is good enough to at least stabilize the value for a guy like Anthony Miller. So let's keep an eye on that. You've also got Tariq Cohen out of the backfield. Hey, maybe David Montgomery can stop juking 43 people to get 1 yard. Maybe he could get 2.5 yards. Who knows? We'll have to see.
Nick Foles, at the end of the day, this is what you're looking for the Chicago Bears. He has as many playoff wins as a starter as the Bears have since 1981. 4. So, that's something they want, someone who can get them to the playoffs. It's a tough division. You got a couple of really good teams there in Minnesota and Green Bay, Detroit. But it's always going to be a battle. So we'll see what happens there. Now, okay, Dwayne, we got to get to this. Everybody listening to this show right now, I'm sure, spit out their coffee, punch their television, kick their dog, just said, what the hell is this? When they heard our old friend Bill O'Brien was at it again. They just traded. If you haven't heard this yet, somehow sit down. The Texans traded away DeAndre Hopkins, arguably the best receiver in football, for the corpse of David Johnson and his bloated contract. And they did it for a second, a fourth, and I think it was a second and a fourth next year. That's not even a pick this year. So there's been a bazillion receivers have gotten traded for first-round picks. Brandon Cooks gets traded for a first-round pick every single year. And now you've got DeAndre Hopkins. You can't get a 1 for him? Number one, why are you trading him? And number two, this is what you got back? You got David Johnson? And Howie Roseman, shame on you for not getting him to Philadelphia and wanting to pay his contract, but that's another podcast.
Well, it's a deal where when all the other teams saw this, they all just spit their coffee out.
Yes.
Like, what the hell?
How is this guy? Does he still have a job? Like,
I don't know. They're petitioning to have him fired, man. They're petitioning the owner right now to have him fired. So,
What does he have on the owners there? Oh my God.
Something.
The McNair family. I feel sorry for you. Yeah. Putin has less on Trump than Bill O'Brien has on the McNairs. It's unbelievable. This guy's unfireable. Jesus.
Yeah. So let's talk fantasy implications. First, let's talk about, DeAndre Hopkins. So football wise, great move, right? I mean, running backs, it's kind of common knowledge now across the NFL. If you look at the analytics, despite that there are varying skill sets and some are definitely better than others, you don't spend big money on them. You don't give up big draft equity on them. So obviously there's something going on here, and we know that, and we've heard that even since then, that there were issues. But still, it's like you say, so what if there are issues? As soon as you tell the whole league DeAndre Hopkins is on, he's available, I'm thinking 2 first-round picks is kind of the minimum that I'm accepting. Not David Johnson. And, oh, by the way, I got to send more draft picks with it to make this deal happen. That is just ludicrous. From a fantasy perspective, overall, I don't like this for DeAndre Hopkins overall. And here's why. It's not that I don't love Cliff Kingsbury, because I do. He ran that up-tempo offense that we thought we would see this past year. I think there's a lot of upside in his offense. But we still have an unproven in Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray was getting better as the year went on. But if you look at the way Kingsbury's offenses work, back even through college, he's never targeted a guy more than like 25 or 26%. He loves to spread the ball around across multiple players. And that's what
30% guy. Yeah.
Yeah, we saw that last year. And yes, so Hopkins, has been a 31, a 31, a 24, a 30. I mean, Hopkins is just like what you said. He's a guy where we have known when we've been drafting him that you're getting a guy that's going to see 150 targets. Just lock it in. I mean, the guy's had 120, 187, 138, 164, 160. So, I mean, this is something that we have to take into account now. So, and Hopkins ADP is going to be really high. And now there's a little bit of an unknown. Now, I'm not guaranteeing this is going to happen, right? We could very easily see Hopkins get a 150, 160 targets. We could see that. Coaches have shown us in the past that they're sometimes willing to adapt based on their talent. But it's at least a question now. Before we knew you're a lock for 150 targets, what makes it easy to take Hopkins in the first, or even early second round, sometimes if he would slide. Well, now that's a little bit more of a question mark for me, Drake, because, just due to the coaching history, just due to a little bit more unknown about the quarterback situation, can the quarterback stay healthy, all of those things. So now I'm looking at Hopkins as, man, I'm not so sure I'd be willing to spend my first round pick just because of the unknown. Now, I know a lot of people will say, but yeah, there's so much more upside. I don't really know how you get much more upside than knowing you're locked in for 150 to 170 targets. Sure. Could you get more efficient? You could get more efficient, but really, if you look at the average depth of target and the way that DeAndre Hopkins has been used over his career, it's probably going to be very similar, in Arizona. Now, what this could do is, does this move Larry Fitzgerald inside? Does this mean Christian Kirk gets even more looks inside? Who knows? But Fitzgerald is a guy that'll be, he'll almost go undrafted in most leagues now. You'll probably be able to pick him up after week 1 and miss most leagues on the wire. But Christian Kirk, this definitely hurts him, right? Because if Hopkins does start to demand more, it makes he's more of an unknown commodity even than he was, at this point last week, even though he's a young receiver. So it's great for the Cardinals from an NFL standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
It's gonna probably make me fade Hopkins at ADP if it doesn't, start to slide.
ADP currently on fantasy football calculator for DeAndre Hopkins 7.2. So yikes. I'm not taking him there.
He could pay off there, but now there's just that slight unknown. Used to, if you took him there, you knew exactly what you were getting. So, and we'll have to see, injuries and things happen and move people around boards as we go through the preseason. But the other name to talk about real quick here in Arizona now is Kenyon Drake, man.
Your boy,
Drake, man, went from
brother from another mother.
Your brother from another, exactly. So this guy, right now. Now Chase Edmonds is not a slouch. He did some things whenever he got his brief moment in the limelight, this past season. But if you look at what Kenyon Drake was doing last year, points per fantasy touch, it was 1.04 per touch, which is pretty good. McCaffrey's at a 1.16. Aaron Jones was at a 1.12. Alvin Kamara was at a 1.01. So, he's right there in the range with these other guys, on a per touch basis. And now he's going to see more touches. He averaged 19.6 fantasy points per game.
Awesome.
So this is a guy that we knew was a good route runner. We liked him for that reason in Miami on a team that we thought would be often trailing and would utilize the backside of the backfield more, because Chad O'Shea last year in Miami was the coordinator. He's gone now, but he had come from New England the year before. Well, now we've got a back that's really good. They can work in space. This is a team that uses four wide more than all the rest of the league combined. And, Kenyon Drake showed out. And so now this is really kind of his job to lose. So I'm really excited about Kenyon Drake. And right now, like I said, I haven't finalized any rankings. I've just really started doing them. But man, it's going to be hard to keep him out of the top 12 is going to be my guess when it's all said and done. We'll have to, again, read the tea leaves as the preseason goes along, and there'll be other things that we'll have to think about. But right now, Kenyon Drake, man, is a guy that I'm super excited about, because I see the offense overall getting better with the addition of DeAndre Hopkins, and Drake is a guy that with David Johnson, with the arrival of Hopkins plus the minus of losing David Johnson, this could be the guy that really benefits the absolute most.
And here's a guy he's getting paid $8 million next year. That's not a guy who's coming into split time, I don't think, not at that paycheck. And he was averaging over 100 yards per scrimmage in the 8 games he played there. So that's a guy who's really valuable. And I think, Dwain, like you mentioned, people in your home league is going to be sleeping on him. Maybe he slides to that 2-3 turn. You scoop him there.
His breakaways per attempt, Drake, 6.5%, which is elite. And it's something that I really look at on running backs, and it's always worked out well for me. So other guys we love, Nick Chubb, 6.7. Aaron Jones in the new scheme he got to play in last year. We pumped him up before the year started, 5.5. So he's in pretty, elite territory whenever it comes to his ability to break carries over 15 yards or more. And that keeps players on the field. It shows that he's got some real ability. And he's finally on a team that knows how to use him. So Kenyon Drake is a guy I'd be super stoked about. And if you're in a dynasty league where somebody's snoozing on Kenyon Drake and you can pluck him away from them for cheap, I'd be willing to send a second round pick, to pick up a guy like Kenyon Drake if I could.
On the other side of that equation, you've got David Johnson going over to Houston. Now, Houston kind of played, running back roulette last year. Lamar Miller got hurt and they brought in Carlos Hyde, and it's just kind of like, all right, who can we get to retread and fill in here? I don't know what to expect from David Johnson. I don't even know where you draft him in fantasy. If he's fully healthy, this was a guy who used to be the number 1 pick. Now it's like, I don't know, do you want him in like the 6th round? It's just, we don't know his health, and that's going to be something we need to monitor all off season. And it's going to be a tough off season because who knows how much with the new CBA we're going to be able to see them practice. And with the coronavirus, how much they're actually going to get in OTAs and whatnot. But I don't know, David Johnson, man, that's a guy that maybe you scoop him late and he's balls to the wall and he's the old school David Johnson and you're winning your league with this 4th, 5th round pick.
Yeah, I think David Johnson is a guy that he was really playing better than people think last year, and he got hurt, man. And he tried to gut through it. And, I think we talked about this on the last podcast with Derek Brown. He had brought this up as well. And, so all people remember is seeing that game where he looked like a granddad, right? With a walker.
Yep.
And, and he did. He looked really bad, but he was playing with a hurt back during that game. And then thereafter, they shut him down. So if you look at David Johnson, though, and what he was able to do, last year before, he got hurt, he was not playing bad. Is he explosive? Nope, he's not. But he's very steady. He's a good pass receiver out of the backfield, which is what I think Bill O'Brien likes. Who the hell knows what Bill O'Brien likes? I think that's what he was looking for. He feels he does have a 3-down back. The problem you're going to have there that we're going to have to monitor, Drake, is really Duke Johnson. Duke Johnson, I mean, his only value is really kind of as a receiver. Mm-hmm. And so you just brought in a guy
right
that if you use him right, he could take away your tells, right, of is this a passing play or is this a running play? And so David Johnson, technically, could be the guy that comes in and does that, and if you look at what David Johnson was doing in an offense that was still maturing and learning its way last year, he, as far as, his receiving, he had 36 receptions, Drake, 370 yards, it says 13 games played, but we know he wasn't really healthy, for many of those. So, but he had 4 touchdowns, receiving. So David Johnson is a guy that with DeAndre Hopkins gone, this is an offense, and we know how often Will Fuller's hurt. They signed Randall Cobb. The running back could be the number 1 targeted guy on the team. If he's going in the 6th round, it's probably a steal. David, Duke Johnson is, it's going to be like Johnson and Johnson, right? That's kind of the backfield we have here. But Duke Johnson is the real guy that could throw the monkey wrench in. Do they really want to utilize 2 guys all the time, or are they going to? If they let David Johnson be kind of a 60-40 guy, it'll be worth. David Johnson will be well worth, probably a 4th round pick even. If they make it more of a 50-50 kind of thing, or one guy does this, the other guy does that, like they did last year with Hyde and with Duke Johnson, well, wow, that would even speak more poorly of Bill O'Brien, because why would you go get a guy that you're just going to use for one thing and telegraph to the other team what you're doing when you traded away DeAndre Hopkins? It's just going to look even worse.
You're paying David Johnson and Randall Cobb more than you would have been paying DeAndre Hopkins, and that just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, you're right. It's
especially when you could just go out and draft a running back.
I mean, Johnson's breakaway attempts last year 5.3%, which is pretty. That's good. It's not great, but it's pretty good. It's on a small sample, and that's running against super light boxes. Or running against, defensive backs instead of linebackers because of the way Cliff Kingsbury runs his offense, which is not the way the Texans run their offense. They run a lot more 2 tight end sets and things like that. So Johnson's going to find space tougher to come by. But I think just by the nature of DeAndre Hopkins being gone, means David Johnson has value. It also obviously means Will Fuller has potentially huge value. Huge if, like triple, quadruple asterisk all around this statement, if he were to stay healthy. I think what we're going to see is, obviously, this is a very, very deep draft with receiver. They're going to draft somebody.
You can't roll with Stills, Fuller, Cobb, Kuti. I mean, that's 4 guys who are going to miss combined 78 games next year. So, I mean,
right, but if you had to pick one of those guys, and who knows where Fuller's going after this news, I don't know if you have it in front of you, like just over the past few weeks, or over the last, couple of days. It's probably not a big enough sample size. But my guess is Fuller right now, depending on what happens with the draft, is probably shooting up, into the 4th round, 5th round territory, of drafts, which is about where you'd probably have to take him. It's going to be high risk, high reward. But, if he's right now, he is the lead guy. He's the number 1 target on the team. And we've seen what Fuller can do. Now, again, that's with Hopkins on the other side of the field. That whole dynamic changes when all of the sudden teams are able to focus more on you.
So this is the Fantasy Football Hustle. I'm Brian Drake. That's Dwain McFarland. You know him from his great work at MattWaldmanRSP.com and EstablishTheRun.com. You can see me over at FightingChanceFantasy.com doing some new cool things over there. Follow us at FC Fantasy Sports. Follow our show here at FF Hustle. He is at Dwain McFarland. I'm at Drake Fantasy. If you're watching this show, I just want to throw it out there. You're a guy that's into fantasy. You're a writer. You're a podcaster. You're looking for that break, somewhere to get going. Shoot me a DM at Drake Fantasy. We're going to be doing some things at Fighting Chance Fantasy Sports. We're going to be looking for some new blood, people to come in and show us what they got in terms of football, basketball, baseball. Whenever this stuff gets back to actually being sports and we can talk about it and write about it, we're going to want to hear from you. So just as a side note there. And I live in upstate New York. Everyone here is either a Giants fan or a Bills fan. Nobody cares about the Jets. The Bills fans are breaking tables left and right. They're going to Home Depot. They're not getting toilet paper. They're getting more tables to jump through because Stephon Diggs is a Buffalo Bill, Dwain. They've gone out and they've put everything on the table before they break it. And they've said, Josh Allen, it's on you now. We've got all the weapons. This defense is out of control. They keep signing guys. Stephon Diggs, John Brown, Cole Beasley in the slot. What are we missing here? This is a playoff run ready to happen in Western New York.
Yeah, I mean, great timing. Tom Brady's gone. Like you said, maybe the Patriots are doing a teardown. The Dolphins obviously just completely hit the reboot button. They just, like, the screen wouldn't shut down, and they just reach over and literally just hard reset the whole computer and just held it until they heard the whole thing shut down. So we know the Dolphins now. So I mean, really, the door's open for the Bills and then potentially the Jets. To try and do something here. And, Josh Allen, as much as we gave him a hard time last year, really made big strides, adjusted completion percentage, according to Pro Football Focus, 70%, which was really good. And that's despite still pushing the ball down the field, 9.7 average up the target, which was down from like 11 the year before or so. And that part of that was, utilizing Cole Beasley. It's still a team, though, that, their identity, still is connected quite a bit, to the running game. Brian DeBull, their offensive coordinator, he's got strong roots and wanting to have a running game. And Josh Allen is a big part of it, right? He's almost like, it's similar to what, the Panthers did with Cam Newton when he was young. Really, that's what I see when I see Josh Allen now. And so he is capable, as a fantasy starter, just because of what he can do with his legs. And he did prove some people wrong, me included, with improving his completion percentage. There's still a ton of people that really watch the film even more than you or I do, that talk about, Josh Allen as an NFL quarterback still has major problems. That his decision-making is not good. And, so, I mean, and I respect a lot of those people's opinions. So I know there's still holes in his game, but, as a fantasy quarterback, he's fine. Now, the question is, can he support John Brown, Cole Beasley, and now Stephon Diggs? So Stephon Diggs immediately becomes the clear number one. And I guess, context matters, right, Drake? So compared to where Stephon Diggs was at when anytime Adam Thielen was healthy and what had happened last year when Gary Kubiak installed his system with Kevin Stefanski. I know we'll talk about the Browns here in a minute, where Stefanski's at now. It's better, right? Because literally anytime Adam Thielen was healthy or was on the field, Stephon Diggs just wasn't getting to be on the field enough, sometimes only running a route on 70% of the dropbacks. So when you think about that, I think this is better because Stephon Diggs is going to be happier. He's going to be on the field all the time. He's going to be the clear first read. Now, having said that, with all those improvements Josh Allen made last year, he passed for 3,300 yards. So,
wow.
Yeah, so it's going to be tough, man. If you start trying to divide it up between three guys, John Brown did well last year. Cole Beasley did well. Stephon Diggs did well. He's going to be the best receiver on the team. You got Dawson Knox, who's still improving. You got Devin Singletary, who's pretty decent out of the backfield as a receiver. I think the problem you're going to see with Stephon Diggs, right, is even if he were to get to like a 25%, market share, it's still not a ton of yardage to be gaining, right? On 3,300 yards. And he could very easily be 21, 22%. So 21 to 22% is fine if you're on a team that's going to throw for 5,000 yards, 6,000 yards. But 20%, on a team that's going to throw for 3,500 yards, say we even give Josh Allen a small improvement because now he's got more talent. Maybe you say 3,750 would kind of maybe be the upper max. I would guess that I would project Josh Allen, even with these changes based on the scheme and what they've done. It's not going to be enough. What you're going to need from Stephon Diggs, and again, I don't know where Diggs' ADP is going to be. So this is all relevant to that. But if he's at 20%, of that, I mean, that makes him like a 5th, 6th round receiver without a lot of upside, and he's going to probably kind of make you crazy on a week-to-week basis, depending on what happens. So, and it's probably okay to take him there in like the 5th or the 6th, but if like he ends up being a 3rd or a 4th round pick, that's going to be problematic because then what you're really hoping is that he dominates. He's going to need 35% of the share to be really worth, a 3rd or a 2nd round pick. With the way the Bills run their offense.
But you've already got Josh Allen, who's only played 2 years, but his max is, or his high is 20 touchdowns. He's already got a relationship with John Brown and Cole Beasley. So it's not like John Brown's just going to get pushed to the wayside and say, oh, sorry, we got this new shiny toy in here. So, yeah, I mean, it's going to be, to me, Stephon Diggs will be fool's gold for fantasy. I don't want him. I don't think he's going to be consistent. Our friend Bob Lung probably won't like him this year. But, you know, if you're starting 3 receivers and he's your 3, okay, I'll take that. But according to ADP, you're not going to be able to get him there. So
yeah, Diggs is going to have his big weeks because he is a really good player, right? Yeah. I mean, he is a good player. He's going to help this team from a team standpoint. It's just the offense combined with some of the quarterback challenges and spreading the ball out across multiple players. It's just really tough for that to be a situation that can be fertile for a 2nd round or 3rd round fantasy pick. Now we'll see where ADP shakes out. Diggs could end up being fine, you know, depending on where he's going, but just on his name value alone, we know how much people put value into just names.
Sure.
My guess is Diggs is going to be probably overpriced.
What do you think this does for Adam Thielen now? They're obviously going to draft a receiver in this receiver heavy draft, but Thielen's a guy who's had a couple of really big seasons, got some cash. But, you know, with an offense that's looking to pound the rock with Dalvin Cook, are you comfortable with Adam Thielen as your wide receiver 1 in 2020?
Oh, dude, absolutely. If Thielen's healthy with Diggs gone, I'm fine with it. I think this is a plus for Thielen. I think the other guy you've got to watch, you know, is Irv Smith.
Love me some Irv Smith.
2nd year. So this is Gary Kubiak, right? This is his offense. What's it like? Mike Shanahan's offense. So Irv Smith is a guy that has a chance to be a breakout player like Kittle was a couple years ago. This is an athletic tight end. Remember, this is Matt Waldman last year ranked Irv Smith and TJ Hawkinson very close together, and both of them were 2 of his highest graded tight end prospects in like the last 8 years. Both of them, not just one of them. So Irv Smith is a guy that's going to be another year in. He started to see more and more snaps as the year went on. Rudolph was used a little bit more in the playoffs. They kind of went with the trusted vet, but I expect to see him take a step forward. And with Diggs leaving, man, that's something I'm really going to watch. So you heard a guy that I was super excited about earlier, Paris Campbell, with Phillip Rivers arriving. The next name I'm going to give everybody is Irv Smith. Man, I'm super excited about what Irv Smith could do. And if you're in any kind of early drafts where he's a guy that you're in a deep bench roster type deal, I'm definitely putting Irv Smith on the end of my roster. He's another name that I'm guessing is going to really skyrocket. We'll have to see what happens. You know, Kyle Rudolph is going to still be there, and that's going to be problematic for Irv Smith. But with Diggs being gone, there is a chance that he really flashes in preseason, and then they just basically unveil it and say, man, we're going with this guy Rudolph's now the backup. And if that happens in that scheme, in that wide zone scheme where they make a run and a pass and everything look the same, the mismatches are against the safeties and the linebackers, and Irv Smith can be a mismatch guy. And he's good enough to also be on the field as a blocker as well, which is one of the things that Waldman actually liked about his game over TJ Hawkinson. So, Hawkinson did pretty solid as a blocker as well, but Irv Smith did really well in that area. So I know the team really likes him. Gary Kubiak, remember, this is a guy that had Shannon Sharp. You know, this guy made Owen Daniels, for crying out loud, you know, into a top 6 or 7 fantasy tight end a couple of times. So Irv Smith is the big name there. And then Thielen, I love Thielen, just a pro's pro. Is going to be the clear number 1 on the team. He's just got to stay healthy.
If you're looking for another tight end out there, Casey Kasem over at Fighting Chance Fantasy did a nice article on this guy. It's Blake Jarwin from your Dallas Cowboys, Dwayne. Jason Witten surprisingly leaves town, doesn't retire, goes to the Raiders. So here's Jarwin. He's going to get a 3-year extension for $24 million. So he's the guy now in Dallas. You've got Dak, you got Amari, you got Zeke, and you got Blake Jarwin. He's the guy. So I think a lot of the casual fan who maybe isn't a Cowboys fan won't know him, or he might not be on their radar. But tell us a little bit about Blake Jarwin at tight end.
Yeah, Jarwin is a guy that, wow, I mean, they kind of went out and put their money, you know, where their mouth is. So, I mean, this is, you know, they've talked about him for the last couple of seasons. Last year, then they go out and they re-added, Witten. And, you know, this is a guy that you and I even talked about. We talked about, I was excited about Jarwin. I love Jason Witten. So I don't want this to sound wrong. As a Cowboys fan, I mean, I love Jason Witten. But I was a little bit sad. You know, I was just like, man, I was really looking forward to see Jarwin, just because of what he's been able to do, in the limited snaps we've seen. And then, he really continued to just do that last year. He's a guy that can work the seam. He can be a mismatch versus, linebackers and safeties. Now Mike McCarthy is in town. Kellen Moore is still the offensive coordinator, but it's going to be moving really more to Mike, McCarthy's type of a system. So we'll have to see. McCarthy hasn't always been the most friendly guy from a tight end standpoint. Now Dak Prescott has, been willing to use his tight ends. So we'll have to see. But the biggest thing is you have Randall Cobb gone and you have Jason Witten gone. So there is an opportunity here for a third guy to really, do something in this passing game. And what I would say is Amari's still the clear number one. Gallup's the clear number two, and they may even be more of a 1A, 1B based on what we saw last year. Amari got his money, $100 million for 5 years, and he's definitely, I know some people don't think he's worth it, but when you watch Amari Cooper play, it's hard to not say he's worth it. And he's another guy that was playing hurt last year. So Jarwin has a chance to settle in as a third guy, which I would think in this offense, he might be able to carve out 15, 16%, of the target share, which wouldn't be bad, with a quarterback like Dak Prescott that, finished last season as one of the top 4 quarterbacks in most fantasy scoring formats. So Blake Jarwin is definitely a guy that I think we'll see climb through the summer. We could have gotten him for nothing, 2 weeks ago. Now after this deal and Witten and Cobb departing, he's definitely a guy that I would be willing to take, in the 10th round plus. He's a name to definitely keep on the list.
Last year, for a lot of the season, Austin Hooper was the top tight end in fantasy. He's on the move now. Atlanta kind of had a fire sale. They don't need money, so they got rid of their running back. They got rid of their tight end, and their tight end heads up to Cleveland 4 years, $42 million to join the Browns. The Browns still have David Njoku. They added Jack Conklin, who might not be the greatest pass blocker in the world, but they also added a fullback in Andy Janovich. Denver trades him for a 7th rounder next year. So that's good news for Chubb and Hunt and all the boys up there. So haven't touched on the Browns yet this offseason with you, Dwain. What do you think about the guys there? Kevin Stefanski taking over as the new head coach. And these are all just great things for this offense. They just have to put it together.
Yeah, I think what we're seeing now is we know which system Stefanski's going to run. He had experience under Norv Turner. He had experience under DeFilippo. He had experience under Gary Kubiak. And it's very clear that really what he's going to center his offense around is what you see from Gary Kubiak, from Kyle Shanahan. We're going to see a lot of 21 sets, so that's 2 running backs. They brought in Janovich, just like you said. We're going to see a lot of 12 sets because now you've got David Njoku, who they're super excited about. If you read, what the coaches and the leadership of the team, what they're saying about Njoku, he's basically got a new lease on life. So I think you're going to see him and Hooper working a lot together. So for me, whenever I think about this situation, and everything's going, they also signed Jack Conklin, so the new right tackle for them, former 1st round pick of the Tennessee Titans. So, or sorry, that was Baltimore Ravens, right? No, Conklin was Tennessee. Titans. Yeah, he was Tennessee Titans. Yep. I was thinking of, there was another tackle that same year, but anyway, they've made some moves that we very clearly see they're going to be running this Kubiak Shanahan style of system. So it's going to be interesting to see what does Baker Mayfield do. Mayfield's typically been a shotgun guy, when he's coming out of college. That's typically what he's operated out of in the first 2 years. He's going to have to be under center a lot more. Notice they went and signed Case Keenum. So Case Keenum came from the Vikings. And so you saw, Vikings 2 years ago where he had a little bit of a playoff run, which was much more around a balanced running game. And passing attack together. So I think that's kind of an insurance policy. If Baker can't quite pick up the reins and do what he needs to, mostly it's probably just for injury. I think they're hopeful that, Baker's got the skill set, it seems like, where he could do this, and it might be better for Baker, right? This is a much more structured offense. And it's an offense that's designed to really create some easier reads for Baker and do some good things. So overall, when I think about, this offense and I think about Hooper, I don't think this is going to be good for Hooper as overall from a fantasy perspective, because I think there's 2 guys. I think we're going to have to, we would have to see one of them really win the job. If Njoku or Hooper gets the clear lead role, it could be a good thing. The problem is you still have Odell Beckham. You still have Jarvis Landry. So Landry will probably play the Z. That's going to be, the flanker position. He's going to be working, more underneath. Odell Beckham will play the split end position. And those guys are both going to see mismatches too, because you already mentioned what we have with Nick Chubb and what you have with Kareem Hunt. So the problem I see with Cleveland this year is I'm excited about their offense. It's going to be much better, but there's a lot of mouths here to feed, and if you put a pecking order together, Odell Beckham Jr. still has to be number one along with Nick Chubb, right? Those are going to be your top two guys. But then after that, I've still got Jarvis Landry. I've got these two tight ends. I've got these two running backs. Yeah, I've got to get Kareem Hunt on the field. So I think there's a chance that Nick Chubb leads the NFL in rushing this year. If he continues to get the same share of carries, that he got
should have got
last
it this year.
year.
I believe he came into week 17 as the leading rusher, but
he was
Derrick
close.
Henry passed him.
Yeah, and he's going to be just in an even better situation this year. So Chubb's a guy to be excited about, but you do still have to worry about, Kareem Hunt. So that's going to make all of those guys are going to be tough first-round picks, but they're all going to be guys that if you start getting into the second, not all of them, but if you start thinking, Chubb, you're going to be willing to look at the end of the first round, but it is tough with Hunt there. Odell Beckham Jr. is a guy that I would be willing to look at still in the second round. If he falls further than that, he's going to be a value.
He's going to be a value this year. I guarantee if he doesn't get traded, which could happen, I think people are sick of his nonsense and his, he hasn't performed the last 2 years. He's a third, fourth round guy this year to me.
Yeah,
I think that's where he falls. But let me hit you with some stuff here, Dwain. As we finish things up here on the Fantasy Football Hustle, Brian Drake, Dwain McFarland, happy to have you guys along. We'll try to cram some of these in more now that everybody's just stuck home alone, and maybe we'll have some new content. Follow us on Instagram at FS Hustle. Go over to Facebook, find the Fantasy Football Hustle. YouTube, that's where you can find all our old archived shows. Search Fantasy Football Hustle. But let me throw some names at you, Dwain, and you put on your predictive hat. Tell me where these guys are going to land over the next few days. All right. All right.
Yep.
Let's start Todd Gurley.
Yeah. If I had to pick somewhere, I think it's Tampa. I'll be honestly, I can't imagine that a team would do this. And if they do, they must not have an analytics department, and they must also never have heard of this thing called Twitter even. So it would be crazy to me. I would not give up a lot. Now, maybe maybe they just want a team to take him for cheap and take on his contract. But even then, say you gave up a 5th round pick for Todd Gurley just so the Rams could unload his contract. You're still stuck with his contract, right? You're still tying up a ton of, really your resources, in a position on a player, that could really still be hurt. So I don't know. I'm going to say that he ends up staying, with the Rams, just because I just can't. And if whatever team does this, they're silly.
I'm going to say Miami because they've got crazy money to throw at people, and you're not starting Jordan Howard every week. Melvin Gordon.
Melvin Gordon is the guy that I would just want to see in Tampa. He's a guy that can play, all 3 downs. He can catch balls out of the backfield. So as far as my prediction, I don't know, because I haven't even seen, honestly, where all he's been talking, but that's the place I would like to see him land, just because Tampa Bay, that would make for a really cool story, because you could technically argue that, is there a more talented set of skill players in the league?
Mm-hmm.
Probably not. You would have to say that would be, definitely one of the top 3 or 4 teams from a skill position player standpoint.
Boy, I'm going to think Melvin Gordon. If they're not sold on Kerryon Johnson, I could see Detroit as an option. Miami, like we just said a second ago, they've got needs. So I think one of those 2 spots. And this guy was the number 1 player in fantasy just a few short years ago, Dwain, Devonta Freeman. And he's now on the street. He's going to be someone's kind of RBBC second fiddle to walk through the door this offseason. It's amazing. But he looked like shit the last 2 years.
Yeah, to me, Freeman hasn't looked bad when he's been able to stay on the field. Actually, his ability to still create runs of over 15 yards has still held strong when he's been healthy. He's just a guy that stays hurt a lot. So I think what you're going to see with Freeman is he's going to land somewhere where he's going to end up being in a timeshare, right? It's not going to be a situation where he would be the lead back. Now, he's another guy that if he's healthy, he could do some damage in a scheme like Tampa. So he's a good pass receiver out of the backfield. He's adequate, at least at, as a blocker. He's a veteran. He's a guy that isn't going to get Brady killed. So, I mean, that he would be another guy that could, end up landing there. But he's a player that wherever he lands, Drake, I'll be excited just to see what Freeman can do. And depending on who's in front of him on the depth chart, we may not be surprised to see him pass somebody, but it's most likely going to be something where they're going to try to, put him in a tandem type situation where it's a rotation.
I'd like to see him. They got a couple of backs, but they're all hurt. Seattle. Like, let him just run around up there. Now, they always kind of have a third down back and whatever. Here's a guy that can do it all if he could stay on the field. And they could spell him with Penny and Carson. So who knows?
Yeah, I wouldn't mind. I mean, I wouldn't mind seeing him in Kansas City if he's going to be cheap.
Sure, sure.
I mean, Seattle, I mean, they still have Chris Carson. They still have Rashad Penny. So it's kind of like
everyone's banged up there.
Yeah, but, no, very, very true.
I see what you mean, though. That'd be a great spot in KC.
Yeah, I mean, you could even see a team like Philly go after Devonta Freeman, since they always like to have multiple backs. You have Miles Sanders and you would have Freeman. Now, that would
we don't want to pay anybody unless they're a lineman, all right?
Well,
we're not paying D-Hop. We're not paying Robbie Anderson. We're not paying anybody.
Well, usually Peterson likes to have really distinctly different kinds of guys, so he wouldn't really fit the role of like that thumper type of player. So I'm not sure that that's something that we could really, see happening. But he's a guy that has tread left. I mean, just got to stay healthy.
There's so many running backs that are on the street right now. My God. Let me hit you a couple more guys. Cam Newton.
Man, it's I don't know, but for whatever reason, my gut just says, is New England going to pull off some silly deal to get Cam Newton? If the Patriots figure out some way to do that, Newton has shown here recently he can keep the interceptions down, which Belichick is going to want. The problem is really just the shoulder. It's kind of back to like the Gurley thing. It's like people are going to feel really good about taking on a contract and understanding really what the injury is. And plus, really, Carolina has no leverage at this point. They've gone out and signed another quarterback. So teams know that Carolina is basically just willing to cut bait. So somebody's going to get Newton, and they're going to get him for pretty cheap. It's just going to be a matter of taking on his salary. So, I mean, I think the Patriots, would be an option. The Chargers have said, no, they're not really looking to do anything.
They're drafting a guy. That's Justin Herbert. Yeah.
So if they're not looking to draft, and Newton's a guy that honestly we may not see him move until after the draft. We may see what teams end up getting to do, because you still got a guy like Andy Dalton, sitting out there as well. Andy
Winston,
Dalton,
Flacco,
Dalton, Winston. I wouldn't be surprised to see a guy like Dalton go to back up Wentz. Give Philly a cheap.
I want Dalton or Flacco to come there and back him up.
Yeah, so I think Dalton would be fine to back up Wentz, who has had the injury issues. Guy can't really catch a break from that standpoint. So Oakland signed Mariota, so they went and grabbed him to compete with Derek Carr. What's funny is they signed the same exact guy, a guy that's willing to not push the ball down the field and freaks out when there's pressure in his face. He just signed like the exact same player again. So, I mean, I think, New England would be the team that, would jump out at me, because Indy's obviously filled their need with Rivers.
There you go, folks. So we wanted to just come on and give you a little insight into free agency. There's going to be a lot more to come, obviously, as there's tons and tons of guys who haven't signed yet. And really, none of these signings are official because people can't go and get a physical. So who knows? Maybe the DeAndre Hopkins deal gets shut down because they fail his physical for David Johnson. They go, you know what? We made a mistake. Let's bring this on back here. But anything you want to close with, Dwayne?
No, man, we didn't really hit on the offensive lineman, but we can hit on that another day. There's definitely been, some movement there. An offensive line is obviously something that we've got to pay attention to. You can file Jimmy Graham getting the money he got from Chicago under the what the hell category. I didn't understand that, with the Bears. But I think those are really the only things. Oh, we missed, you mentioned Jordan Howard in Miami, but, why do you want a guy that's going to he's going to get the carries inside the 5, and Miami's going to be inside the 5 4 times all year. So,
right. Isn't Patrick Laird the guy there now? No. Oh, well, we appreciate it, folks. He's Dwain McFarland from Establish the Run, Matt Waldman, RSP.com. We got to get in touch with Matt. Once he finishes the RSP, I can't wait to read it and get him on to talk about that. I
had a good convo with him today on the phone. Matt's doing good. He's obviously grinding it out right now.
Sure.
Trying to finish up. He's in good spirits, and, he's waking up at like 2 a.m. and, working till he basically can't keep his eyes open.
He's awesome.
So he's out there getting after it for everybody. Hey, we did have one last question in the chat room. Chargers skill players with Tyrod Taylor. We talked about this one before, Drake. Obviously, like you just said, they're going to be drafting a quarterback most likely. But Tyrod Taylor, I am not a fan at all. He's another see it, throw it kind of guy. It's going to hurt Keenan Allen. Keenan Allen is a timing, wins off of quick separation. Tyrod Taylor is not a guy that sees that kind of stuff well. Who would probably benefit the most from Tyrod Taylor would probably be Mike Williams, the guy that you just heave it deep to. Also not really a great thing for Austin Eckler. Nope. So we would have to see. I would be honestly more excited about seeing a rookie land there that we could learn more about and hopefully have somebody that could keep the offense moving better. Hunter Henry probably be okay, but Tyrod Taylor is just not, a great quarterback when it comes to seeing windows and anticipating throws. Much more of a guy that, he's got to see it running in front of him. And don't get me wrong, there's look, Lamar Jackson still does that. So, but he's in a great scheme that utilizes, his talents in a very unique way that creates crazy matchups for everybody else on the field. So if the Chargers change their scheme and they decide to use Tyrod Taylor that way more, maybe we could see, something there. Maybe there's something that, we're not thinking about right now, and that could evolve over time. But overall, I would take it as a downgrade versus what they had with Philip Rivers.
There you go. Folks, stay safe. Stay at home. That's the main thing.
Stay home.
Stay home. Listen to The Hustle. Check out all kinds of great podcasts out there. And don't do anything crazy. Even if you're young and you think, I can go get bread and milk and all that stuff, just take it easy. All right. We need you around here. We can't lose subscribers. Okay. We can't have you people getting sick and dying on us. The subscribers are precious. I kid, but no, I don't. We need you. Go to YouTube and subscribe. All right, guys. Yeah. Thanks so much. We'll catch you next time. Follow us on social media, and you can find out when our next show is coming down. Take it easy.